How did World War II change the world and impact the present? By me. Although World War II was easily the most destructive war in Earth's history, looking at the positive side of a negative event is important. Even though World War II resulted in around 70 million casualties, there are still some good things that came out of this war. First, World War II made countries all around the world change their medical ethics. After learning about human experimentation done to prisoners of war by German doctors and scientists, countries all around the world signed the Helsinki Declaration, which outlined ethical standards for human experimentation in research subjects. Next, World War II led to something that we all have in our lives. In fact, without World War II, you likely wouldn't be listening to me talking right now. You probably know what I'm about to say. World War II led to the first computer. All computers in the world are descendants from the first computer, the Colossus. The Colossus was the first ever digital computer, which was created by British codebreakers to decrypt Axis power transmissions. It was easily one of the most important tools in World War II that led to the defeat of the Axis powers. Here's something else you probably didn't know World War II helped create. It was the reason why the world has access to synthetic rubber. Since Japan had conquered most of Southeast Asia, where there were rubber trees, Japan had total control over most of the world's rubber during World War II. Without rubber, the Allied forces wouldn't be able to make tires and boots. In other words, they wouldn't be able to win the war unless they dealt with the rubber problem and fast. After some scientists spent a while working on making a material with the same qualities as rubber, they finally made government rubber styrene, or GRS. It was easier to make than rubber, like the real stuff, the real rubber. So the synthetic rubber was being made at more than twice the rate of the real rubber by the end of the war. And now, today, this rubber is being used in quite a lot of everyday materials, like rubber bands and erasers. Speaking of everyday materials, World War II also led to the creation of two sticky substances, glue and duct tape. While scientists were trying to make clear plastic gun sights for rifles in 1942, they accidentally made super glue. Although they never exposed this discovery to the general public for 10 or so years, eventually, in 1951, Eastman Kodak released the first superglue to the public, and in 1970, it became widely known as superglue. Now, duct tape was first invented a mere year after the first super glue was made in 1943. It was made by an Illinois mother named Vesta Stout and was later acquired by Johnson & Johnson. The US government wanted a tape that would keep moisture out of ammunition cases, as that would ruin the bullets inside. Johnson & Johnson said that it was first called duct tape with a K, but later became known as duct tape with it when it started to be used in air ducts. And one other good thing that came out of this war was a massive increase in job opportunities. However, I didn't really talk about it all that much because the job opportunities m- mainly, how can I put this? I didn't write about the job opportunities because they felt like it came out of depression, so it wasn't really that much of a important topic, I guess. Probably should have wrote about it though.
That's okay. That's okay.
Moving on to the next topic, we have to talk about how World War II negatively impacted our world. First and foremost, obviously, the war resulted in deaths. What separated World War II from other wars, however, was that this war was the most destructive war in human history. Around 75 million people died in this war, and countless more people were injured. On top of all this, millions of buildings and cities were razed to the ground and were utterly demolished. This damage, some of it irreplaceable, impacted the world decades after the war ended. Next, the war resulted in an arms race and an overall increase in destructive capabilities. Since the beginning of the war, the US was suddenly manufacturing millions of guns, bombs, tanks, ships, etc. To increase their advantage, the US obviously wanted to make more powerful weapons that would give them a better chance of winning battles and, in a larger sense, the war. Because of that want to get stronger weapons, at the end of the war, all firearms had been improved in some form. And tanks such as the M4 Sherman and planes like the P-51 Mustang were much stronger than older warplanes. However, the most notable war invention was the atom bomb. This was what most people of the time in the arms race was spent developing, and it was what led to the destruction of Japanese cities Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, as well as the deaths of around 226,000 people. Other countries had also made advances in nuclear weapons, and this advance in weaponry is what makes another world war so terrifying. Instead of 75 million people dying in World War III, that number of people that would die could be doubled, tripled, or even quadrupled because of the weapons advancements that were made in the time between World War II and now. Because of weapons manufacturing as well as many other factors, the US government was spending a lot of money. To be exact, about 350 billion US dollars was spent by the government during World War II, which is also twice as much money as the government had spent for the entire history of the US government up to the beginning of World War II. Because of the war, the government taxed many more people to spend money, which then increased their national debt by $200 billion. You know where some of the money that the US government spent went to? Manufacturing fertilizers and pesticides for farmers to use so they could have more food for the soldiers battling. At the end of World War II, the government found out that they had put way too much money on making these fertilizers and pesticides, so they decided that they might as well put them to good use. This resulted in an increase of production of just about every fruit and plant, especially corn, which resulted in more junk food, which resulted in more obesity. Furthermore, before the war started, there was a huge spike in people moving to suburbs and cities. Since suburbs are made for driving, lots of people exercise less and people got less exercise, which also contributed to obesity.
There was
Hmm?
a question in the chat from Jay about the obesity increase after World War II.
Yeah, how did a war lead to obesity increase?
Well, as I said, the main thing was that the government put in a lot of money to making pesticides and fertilizers and stuff for the soldiers because they wanted to make food more efficiently and stuff. But they spent too much money on those fertilizers and pesticides, and they didn't just want to throw it away. So because of that, that led to an increase in production of just about every food, but that obviously isn't going to be good. And also, as I said, the suburbs was also a huge reason for an increase in obesity because tons of people were getting much less exercise.
Can I jump in for a second? So I know during World War II and after World War II, the lifestyle in the U.S. Changed dramatically. Um, People needed to work very, very fast, so they demanded convenience food. So as a result, McDonald's, your favorite food supplier, was created, and people, e- especially American people, start to be dependent on fast food, and those fast food contain high calories, and the size of the fast food was getting bigger and bigger. People are more dependent on convenience food, and that contributed to the obesity increase as well. So
Right.
okay, over to you, Ian.
All right. Overall, World War II impacted the present in a negative way. Most people think of World War II as the bloodiest war in history that resulted in the deaths of 75 million people and the creation of the most dangerous weapon ever, the atom bomb. However, it's important to see that disasters don't only cause destruction. Even though 95% of the war causes pain and problems, the other 5% of the war causes good things, like the creation of computers, more human rights laws, and the United Nations. So be appreciative of what the war gave us and be thankful that every country in the world agrees that a war on the scale of World War II should never happen again. Without this war, we wouldn't be where we are today, living the lives we have now. Although I wouldn't say that right now is that great either. And that's it.